Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a holistic coach and trauma-informed practitioner. This podcast seeks to break out of the echo chamber of societal narratives that perpetuate our institutions and challenge the status quo of wellness and beyond. Join me as we decolonize our minds, address and use our privilege, and prioritize inclusivity. Here, diverse experiences are honoured, and together we are fostering a space that stands for higher love for all. As a listener, you are not just here to passively consume. You're an ambassador for deep healing and societal evolutions, ready to engage in thought-provoking, challenging conversations. As your host, I'm committed to providing ever-expansive spaces that inspire us to contribute to a world defined by higher love. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Hi everyone. I have to say, I am loving the new energy and direction for the Higher Love with Megan podcast. I'd like to thank all of you who have commented, shared, tuned in, and sent me messages letting me know how the podcast episodes have been landing for you since I relaunched last month. In the podcast world, we speak into a mic and put it out into the ether with some awareness that what we put out there is hopefully being heard and received. But how that is being heard and received is a mystery. So I really appreciate every single message, every single comment and DM. And if you felt like reaching out but haven't yet, I would love to hear from you. The best way you can connect with me is via my Instagram at Higher Love with Megan. In this episode, I'd really like to build on my solo episode, Breaking Out of the Wellness Echo Chamber, and expand on the journey that I want for my listeners. In a recent conversation with my podcast producer and editor extraordinaire, Lucy, I recognized that the beauty of this new podcast direction is that I am truly on the same journey in real time as my listeners. I am breaking out of the echo chamber of privileged wellness as much as you are. I'm not the expert, I am not the guru, and how refreshing is that? I don't fully know how to decolonize my mind, interrogate my white biases. I don't even know what half of my white biases are yet. I don't yet know how collective trauma infiltrates into all aspects of our societal systems and institutionalized narratives. I don't know how they affect the lives of people whose background is very different to mine. Every conversation that I have educates and informs me as much as it does you. I end every conversation changed in some way, with new insights to take on personally and professionally. This podcast is now just as much for me as it is for my listeners. Literally in this moment, I'm imagining us like unlearning running buddies. The beauty too is that the further I go along this path, the more rich and deep the conversations will become, and you as a listener will be right there with me. I think that the word journey is a little overused in the wellness world, but it certainly does feel like we are all on one here together. So the first thing I really want for my listeners is to recognize where we are at the beginning. And for that, we need to pack our beginners' mindsets in our suitcases with us. An increasing capacity to listen, to be open-minded, to be patient, compassionate with ourselves and others, and to be curious, eager and hungry to learn, to unlearn, and to see things in a new way. I'm conscious that the topics in these conversations can be confronting. In Disrupting the Wellness Industry with Keri Jarvis, Keri described the complexity of catering for socio-economic disparity because we struggle to even name or talk about being poor. And as a result, the lowest economic classes are some of the least catered for within wellness work.
But to me, working class and poor people are like the last group that we're excluding. Like we're all being like, oh, I'm doing my anti-racist work and I'm interrogating my heteronormativity biases or like cis heteronormativity biases. But we're not really talking about how we're not including poor people in our spaces. And I imagine that as people are listening to this, we can even get this like physiological response to talking about poor people. And like we don't want to admit it. We don't want to admit that we're in proximity to that. We want to imagine that people who are poor are different from us, because then that makes it okay that we don't include them in the kinds of things that we're talking about. And obviously that's just not true.
So much of what we speak to within wellness does not cater for all socio-economic groups. Over the past years, I've found it very challenging that coaching and therapy is very easily accessible if you can pay for it. And if you can't, join a waitlist for several years. This has incentivized me over the past years to work with local authorities organisations. And through this work, I realised how much of my language that I would ordinarily share online or within my regular events or workshops that just are not appropriate in all spaces. And this shows up particularly with poor people. As Keri draws our attention to, it's actually even challenging for us to say the words poor people. It just has a lot of baggage and connotations around, is that an okay thing for me to be saying? Is that offensive? Is that the right thing? Is that the wrong thing? I even noticed this reaction in myself of saying poor people. But if we can't name something and speak directly to something, how can we actually address it? How can we actually work with it? The thing is, within the wellness space, we like to think that our work is accessible and relevant to everyone. We like to think that we are doing purposeful, valuable work in the world, which on the whole we are. But our inability to address and talk about socio-economic disparity is very limiting. And topics such as this can be challenging because likely all of us identify with, in inverted commas, being good people. And in many respects, we are. None of us want to admit that we are part of a very wide, very entrenched, very systemic, institutionalized collective problem, and that we have unconsciously been complicit within that. None of us want to believe or entertain that we are possibly racist, classist, or have cultural biases. We're all really good people, right? We've put in our spiritual reps, done a fair bit of omming and journaling and morning routines and therapy and yoga and coaching and somatic releasing and breath work. We were, maybe, hopefully, raised well with good values, and we do good work and are all round good eggs in the community and in society. So the idea that we are and have been doing something, in inverted commas, wrong, causes a glitch in the matrix that we can't quite wrap our head around, or perhaps are just not even willing to go there or acknowledge. Yet, when we approach issues such as racism or oppression with but I'm not racist, so this doesn't apply to me, we are actually denying any interrogation of what we have come to learn or what white society has taught us as normal. A photo recently posted by Miss Anne Harriman showed a white man holding a sign at a protest saying, "I am now realising my own Islamophobia." In the caption beneath, Miss Anne wrote, "When I saw a white man walking in a protest with this sign, I was deeply moved. It's a profoundly powerful statement for so many reasons." I too was very moved by this picture online. The humility that it takes to recognise that we have been complicit within something for such a long time, and for us to be able to step out of that place of ego and put our hands up, being outwardly vocal about what we might have done and where we want to be, stepping beyond this fear of being judged or fear of being misunderstood. It's about time that we all took ownership of where our biases are, and this is the threshold that I am inviting my listeners into. A thought that I had recently was, slightly to my horror, that if I was to call a plumber or an electrician, or if I was to hire a lawyer, I would very unconsciously assume that a white man would show up. It feels immensely edgy to admit that. And sure, there are likely statistics suggesting a lot of plumbers are white men. However, let's take this a step further. If you asked me to draw a picture of a person, I would automatically draw a white person. This is a white bias. By simply stopping at, "This work doesn't apply to me because I'm not racist," I would be cutting myself off from expansion and growth, and from being the type of ally that is required if we are to move towards a place of equality and collective liberation. To quote equality advocate Africa, who I follow online at the Vitamin D Project, by not acknowledging the deep roots of racism in our society, you're not just observing, you're participating. Saying, "I don't see colour," isn't virtuous. It's this very ignorance that allows racism to flourish. We all need to be able to separate out our white biases, and who I am as an individual actually has nothing to do with being a nice or being a good person. For this work, we have to be able to hold more than one thing, more than one truth at a time. Binary thinking, that is, thinking something is either or, one or the other, is actually entrenched in white ideology, the us and them, the right or wrong, good or bad. We see it everywhere in the extreme polarization of our societal values. You need only look at the comments section of any socio-political post to see the apocalyptic, battling it out to be the best troll of the day. The inverted commas good girl and need to get things right and perfect is also part of this white ideology. If you look at other cultures, more specifically cultures who are still close to their roots, like indigenous communities, this notion of right or wrong, getting things right, does not exist in the same way. Nature itself is not right or wrong, good or bad. It just is. Weather is just weather. Seasons are just seasons. It's the meaning that we attribute to them that makes them what they are. This polarizing, binary thinking is rooted in separation, and we have to expand our capacity if we are to move towards wholeness, healing, and collective freedom. Again, in conversation with podcast producer extraordinaire, Lucy, I shared something with her that someone had said to me, which she, as someone who identifies as a white passing but brown Arab woman, said could be potentially harmful to some groups. My immediate response was to jump to the person's defense, but they're a really nice person. We immediately unpacked this. Why is it that as a white woman, I jump on the bandwagon to justify something harmful by glossing it over with someone's niceness? It's not how it should be. In fact, it's totally invalidating. Niceness has nothing to do with white bias. This was also illuminating to me, however, in a totally different way. I realised how excited in this moment I felt to discover another place where unconscious whiteness shows up for me. See, I used to feel this dreadful, crippling shame when I landed on these things, when I said something offensive or got it wrong. Sometimes I still do. But in this example, I knew her shift had taken place because I could say, wow, I never thought about it like that. I can see how what I said is harmful and invalidating. Next time, I would choose to not say that and to say something else. And that was it. When we can approach our learning or unlearning with this element of detachment, recognizing that what I am saying or thinking is a symptom of the collective societal conditioning in which I've been programmed, and less about me being a good or bad, right or wrong person, then we can actually open ourselves up to grow and change. And I really encourage you as a listener to enter into relationships with things that you say or do with this same curiosity and non-attachment. Keri Jarvis said this beautifully. Let's practice saying things I used to say that I wouldn't say now, and normalize that together. Curiosity is our best friend on this journey. This level of curiosity is essential in simply witnessing our reactions to things that we see, hear, or read. I recently saw a video scrolling on Instagram by a woman of colour talking about things that white women do. How white women only rally when it's for a cause that directly affects them. I immediately noticed that I was triggered. I didn't class myself in that bracket. I watched my indignation, my offence, my wanting to shut it down, my wanting to comment or query it. But in watching my response, I also learnt another lesson. I recognised the altogether too familiar experience of a white person, more specific to me, a white woman, taking offence to what a woman of colour had to say about collective whiteness. How horrified or attacked we can feel when people of colour categorise us the other way around, how it brings up all the sticky feelings that I don't want to address. In being able to watch and detach from my reaction, I could witness the privilege present in my reaction itself. I could almost eye roll at myself. Oh, here we go, another white woman feeling attacked by someone of colour about their whiteness. How quaint. I was able to hold the comment that was being shared and interrogate how I have played an unconscious role in this. It is here that we can step into choice and into action. How can I use my privilege to ensure I no longer perpetuate this aspect of whiteness, where I only step in when it impacts me? How can I hold the anger and frustration of people of colour and stay in the room too? Again, it's important here too for us to be able to separate out being white and whiteness. Now, I'm still learning and discovering where these lines are, but a significant shift has happened for me here also. In conversation with Leah Kim, host of Voices on the Side podcast, Leah spoke about how white supremacy and whiteness, white privilege, also harms white people. It is not being white that harms us. It is whiteness itself that has such an impact on society as a whole. What harms one person harms everyone. When I first started the process of decolonizing my mind and biases, especially in regards to the wellness industry itself, I unconsciously fell into a place of shame, guilt, and hatred of being white, and felt so much frustration and animosity towards fellow white people. Some of this is still there, especially given the riots of recent weeks and the past 10 months of apathy and neutrality from far too many people. However, I realised that this hate turned inwards, this judgment towards myself for being white, was actually not very helpful. Sure, it's part of the process. We often have to reject something in order to support us moving away from it. Like how repulsed you become by the smell of cigarettes when you first give up smoking. However, it's not helpful to stay there. Me hating or feeling ashamed of being white is just going to cause me to fragment or separate out from myself in some way to make myself wrong, to make being me wrong. And as we know, healing is about wholeness, total acceptance and compassion of all parts of ourselves. And I'm going to be in this body and I'm going to be white for all of this lifetime. This is not going to change. So I might as well embrace it and use the privilege of that as a source for good. This is what we call using our privilege, embracing all that comes in positive benefit from who I am and the way that I look, the way that I identify and present to the outer world, and utilize it to call for something else and take the action that I can to get there. So if shame, guilt, self-loathing arises for you amidst this journey, know that it is part of the process and something that I too am continuously cycling through also. Let it, however, guide you into something new towards action and utilizing every ounce of your privilege too. I keep coming back to this notion of higher love for everyone, higher love for all. For me right now, it's like a North Star. Now, as I said in Breaking Out the Wellness Echo Chamber, it might take true unity and equality a while for us humans to work out and actualize. But I am really calling you to step forward as part of that process for future generations. Let the buck of hate, division, and separation stop with you in your family line. I say this having just come back from a plant medicine ceremony where the item on the medicine's agenda was for me to cleanse my ancestral lineage of hate and oppression. So I know full well the magnitude of this. But this was put to me so beautifully in an episode recording last week. Whilst talking about the evolution of feminism, my guest Sophie said, "We stand on the shoulders of the women who have come before us." These words really stuck with me. I have a gold bracelet that belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman who I know very little about, but about whom I would like to know a whole lot more. A woman who was before her time, married to a politician who campaigned for equal rights of women. I stand on her shoulders. The liberties that I have today, the liberties we all have today, are the result of action that has been taken by past generations. Consider for a moment how many lives have been lived in your ancestral line since the beginning of human life. How many sacrifices have been made? How many love stories have there been, wars fought, battles lost and won? Everything they did has amassed to you being here today, in this exact moment as you are. Every day we question and get distracted and limited by the stories of whether you are enough, whether you're deserving, whether you're loved and lovable. Consider in this minute right now, every generation that has come before you, for you to be here breathing in this moment right now. You stand on every single one of those people's shoulders. There is so much power and possibility and life and love gushing through your veins. And here we are wondering if we are enough, if we're deserving, if we're okay. You are. It's time we embodied our full selves and joined the collective journey towards collective liberation and a better society and world for future generations to come. They will stand on our shoulders. And what we choose to do today, to do tomorrow, who we choose to be and become dictates how that goes. When I shared this solo episode with my podcast producer extraordinaire, Lucy, she pointed out that when I speak of ancestors, I am bringing to mind white women, the white women who have fought for equality for me to be the woman who I am today, which is true. I am a white woman with ancestors of white descent. But what escapes my mind due to whiteness is bringing to mind ancestors from Indigenous communities and people of colour whose voices and example have been shared for centuries and decades on topics that I am only beginning to lean into. The fight for freedom and equality and unity rests on their shoulders. So when we think about ancestors, our ancestral lineage, may we also spare a significant place within our mind and within our heart to give thanks for ancestors of all people who have come before us too. People who've had to fight to have their voices heard, and may it illuminate to us how crazy it is that people are still having to fight to have their voices heard. I want future generations to realise and actualise a higher love that we can only dream of in a world currently rife with inequality, disparity, oppression and destruction. But we have so much hope. You only need to look at the unity protests this week in Britain in response to the race riots and know how many great things are possible every day. I invite you as a listener into that change, into that hope, into that higher love for all. Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.